oppression, silencing. Distressed voices cry out together. Chants for freedom echo in crowded streets as people rise to fight an autocracy built on fear and control. We've seen this image countless times. Masses united against a tyrant, a dictator whose power is enforced with cruelty and anger. In those moments, our collective will rallies against the oppressor. We tell ourselves the enemy, the tyrant, is out there, in a palace or a position of authority, separate from us. But Carl Jung's dark truth reveals a more unsettling reality. The tyrant isn't out there. He's inside you. This revelation lands like a jolt. It's far easier to see evil as an external force, to blame some distant figure for all that is wrong. Yet Jung suggests that the seeds of tyranny live within each of us, buried in the shadowed corners of our psyche. The mirror that we hold up to condemn the tyrant outwardly may actually be reflecting our own inner nature. The same anger and fear that drive an oppressor to dominate others can exist in embryo inside our hearts. As uncomfortable as it is, take a moment to consider this possibility. That part of you that flares up in rage, that craves control when you feel vulnerable, could that be a small tyrant in the making? The idea feels threatening, like an attack on our self-image. But it is also strangely liberating. If the tyrant is inside, then perhaps we hold the key to disarming him. Why would Jung claim that a tyrant lives inside us? To answer this, we must confront the shadow, the unseen parts of ourselves that we bury or deny. These are our hidden impulses: rage, jealousy, lust for power, the desire to hurt or to dominate, and the fear that fuels them. We like to think of ourselves as good people. The darker traits feel alien, so we cast them away into the unconscious. But what we push down doesn't vanish. It gathers strength in the dark. Often we project these disowned qualities outward. It's no coincidence that the very things which anger and disgust us in others are the traits we refuse to see in ourselves. As Jung observed, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The cruel authoritarian we despise, the liar, the manipulator, they mirror something secret in us. We condemn them with passion, partly to avoid facing that potential within our own soul. Jung knew the lengths we go to avoid introspection. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, he wrote. It's easier to shout at a villain than to quiet ourselves and listen for the villain within. We might join righteous chants against oppression in the world, all the while neglecting the private oppression happening inside our psyche, the way we silence our own doubts or cruelly judge our own weaknesses. If we lack awareness of this inner tyrant, we risk falling victim to it. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, the fear and anger we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves will control us from the shadows. We'll find ourselves dominated by emotions and impulses we don't understand, as if some outside force or fate were pulling the strings. Fate becomes a tyrant, ruling our life because we failed to rule ourselves. Think about that. An inner autocracy of unseen drives can end up running your life like a dictator behind the scenes. You might outwardly condemn tyranny, yet be ruled by anxiety, by compulsions, by a desperate will to control everything around you because you cannot control what's inside. The shadow tyrant thrives on your blindness to it. It's one thing to talk about shadows and tyrants in theory, and it's another to feel it in the raw details of everyday life. Think of a typical Gen Z scenario. A young woman lies in bed late at night, distressed as she scrolls through social media. Post after post shows friends and influencers seeming happy, successful, perfect. Her heart tightens with envy and inadequacy. She hungers for the dopamine rush of validation, yet each comparison makes her feel worse. There's a voice inside her that sneers, You're not enough. You'll never matter like they do. That voice is cruel, absolute. The voice of an inner tyrant. Under its rule, she becomes both the oppressed and the oppressor of herself, caught in a vicious cycle of social comparison and self-loathing. In chasing external approval, she has handed over the throne of her happiness to a merciless inner dictator, one that keeps raising the bar, never satisfied no matter how many likes or compliments come. It cages her true self-worth, locking it behind bars of fear and self-doubt. Or picture a young man after a painful breakup. The person he loved is gone, and he feels powerless and hurt. In his pain, anger starts to boil, an urge to regain control by any means. Maybe he sends hateful messages or swears to never open his heart again. Maybe he starts treating the next person with cold, possessive behavior, trying to avoid being hurt twice. These are the commands of his inner tyrant. Never be vulnerable, strike back, build walls. His anger and heartbreak coalesce into a personal regime of cynicism. Instead of healing, he finds himself ruled by bitterness. The tyrant inside has convinced him that empathy and trust are weaknesses, and that to fight his pain, he must become hard and unyielding. In trying to protect himself, he ends up imprisoning his own capacity to love in a cage of cynicism. In quieter moments, you might notice a subtler inner conflict. Perhaps you felt it. Part of you wants to pursue a dream, write music, start a business, confess your feelings, but another part shuts it down out of fear. A harsh inner voice might whisper, "Don't even try. You'll fail. People will laugh at you." That inner voice acts like a tyrant, silencing dissent within your mind. It silences your creativity and courage, keeping you small. You become stuck, as if there's a war inside between your aspirations and an internal oppressor who insists on playing it safe and keeping you down. This is how the tyrant within operates. It might wear the disguise of your own voice, but listen to its tone. Rigid, unyielding, often laced with contempt or panic. It thrives on your anger at yourself and your fear of change. It tells you that controlling everything, your image, your emotions, the people around you, is the only way to survive. It drives you to perfectionism and people-pleasing, or alternatively to isolation and callousness. And every time you obey that voice, it grows stronger. We often don't recognize this inner oppression for what it is. We think, "I'm just anxious," or "I'm just not good enough," without seeing that there is an internal narrative mercilessly oppressing us. We beat ourselves up for mistakes, then wonder why we feel so small and trapped. Jung had a warning for this. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. In constantly condemning ourselves, essentially acting as our own tyrants, we do not free ourselves to grow. We only tighten the chains. The more we lash ourselves with criticism, the more we reinforce the tyrant's hold on our psyche. For many in Gen Z, this dynamic is painfully familiar. We carry the weight of high expectations and uncertainties about the future, and inside we have a tyrant that uses those pressures to torment us. It tells us we'll never reach the ideal, that we must hustle harder, look better, be smarter, or else. It's always an or else, an implicit threat of worthlessness. Living under that inner regime, we become exhausted, distressed, and isolated, even as we smile for the next selfie or tell our friends, "I'm fine." How do we deal with the tyrant inside? The first step is to shine a light on it, to see it clearly. We have to notice when that harsh, controlling voice takes over, and call it by its name. Recognize that when you're berating yourself mercilessly or scheming to manipulate someone out of fear, that is not your whole self speaking. It is an aspect of you, a shadow trying to seize power. By identifying the inner tyrant, you create a slight distance from it. You can say, I see my inner tyrant at work right now, instead of simply being swept up in its commands. This takes honesty and courage. it is much easier to remain in denial or to justify our negative impulses as righteousness. But remember Jung's insight. Real enlightenment comes not from ignoring our darkness, but from confronting it. Enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious, as Jung is often quoted. We must drag the tyrant from the shadows into the light of awareness. That might mean admitting to ourselves, yes, a part of me wants to hurt others when I'm hurt, or yes, a part of me enjoys feeling superior or in control. These admissions are difficult, they humble us, but in that humility lies our salvation because we finally see the tyrant for what it is. A frightened fragment of our psyche, not an all-powerful truth. Indeed, what we discover by examining the inner tyrant is that it's fueled by pain and fear. No one becomes a tyrant, outwardly or inwardly, without a story of suffering behind it. Jung noted that the cruelest despots often start as deeply wounded individuals. He suggested that the real tyrant often originates in an unresolved mother complex. In other words, unresolved childhood trauma can possess a person and turn them monstrous. Our inner tyrant, too, usually stems from old wounds, moments when we felt helpless, unheard, unloved. Rather than face that hurt, we try to dominate it by force. We become tyrannical toward ourselves and others to avoid ever feeling that vulnerability again. But what if, instead of letting that wounded part of us run rampant in destructive ways, we approached it with understanding? This is where the inner tyrant begins to lose its grip. When you notice it and understand its origin, you can respond differently. Instead of blindly obeying the voice that says, attack or withdraw or control everything, you can pause and say, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me, but there's a better way. In that moment, you are speaking as the compassionate leader of your psyche, not the tyrant. You are reclaiming your throne. One of the paradoxes of inner work is that fighting the tyrant with more tyranny doesn't work. You can't bully your inner bully into submission. That just creates an internal civil war. The way to transform the tyrant is through awareness and, yes, even empathy for that part of yourself. This doesn't mean condoning its harmful behavior, but it means recognizing the hurt and fear beneath it and choosing to heal that, rather than just chop off the symptom. It means practicing self-compassion where previously there was only self-criticism. When you do this, the inner tyrant gradually loses its will to dominate because it no longer needs to. The underlying fear is being addressed at its root. Think of it like taming a wild creature. At first it snarls and lunges, just as your inner tyrant rages when you challenge it. But if you approach with steady, calm strength, without hatred, that creature can gradually be domesticated. Similarly, by continuously bringing your inner darkness into consciousness and responding with patience and firmness, you transform that energy. What once was a force of self-destruction can become a source of insight and strength. The intense passion of the tyrant, once acknowledged, might fuel your drive to achieve meaningful goals or to stand up for yourself in healthy ways. The inner tyrant's keen eye for where you feel hurt can, when not distorted by rage, help you identify what truly needs healing in you. Jung often spoke of the importance of integrating our shadow, not eliminating it, but integrating it. A shadow integrated becomes a source of wisdom rather than chaos. It's as if the tyrant, once confronted and understood, steps down from his throne and transforms into an advisor instead of a dictator. You regain your inner freedom. The energies that were trapped in that cycle of anger and fear get liberated for more constructive purposes. Of course, this process isn't easy or quick. It is a journey of individuation, as Jung called it. Becoming whole by facing the rejected parts of ourselves. It can feel like walking into the underworld, confronting inner demons face to face. It requires support, reflection, sometimes the help of a therapist or mentor. But every step you take into that darkness, you reclaim a piece of your power that was scattered. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell, Jung wrote. In practical terms, it means we cannot rise into our highest, healthiest self without daring to descend into the darkest depths within us. The inner tyrant is part of those depths. By growing roots into that hell, by understanding and healing our inner oppression, we give ourselves the foundation to reach toward the light. Imagine what life can be when the tyrant no longer runs the show. This doesn't mean that you never feel anger or fear again, or that you've defeated a part of yourself for good. It means that you have established an inner democracy of sorts, where no single dark voice gets to overpower your whole mind unchecked. You become aware of that voice and can choose not to follow it. The power dynamic inside you shifts. Your conscious self, the part that strives for balance, creativity, and growth, takes the lead, and the tyrant part is understood, tended to, and kept in its proper place. When the inner tyrant is tamed, a new atmosphere emerges in your psyche. Instead of constant oppression and judgment, there is more openness and safety to feel and express. Instead of self-sabotaging every time you feel threatened, you can respond with resilience and clarity. You find that you don't fly into as many rages or sink into as much despair because you recognize those extreme reactions as whispers from the past, not commands you must obey in the present. This inner liberation has effects on the outside world too. When you are not ruled by inner fear, external fearmongers lose their grip on you. When you have befriended your own shadow, you are less likely to be seduced by an outer demagogue who plays on people's unacknowledged shadows. You can engage with others from a place of empathy rather than reactivity. Your relationships improve as you stop projecting your worst qualities onto those around you. You no longer unconsciously seek tyrants to rule you, nor do you unconsciously become a tyrant to those you love. In essence, you break the cycle. The great chain of tyrants creating more tyrants, whether in families, relationships, or nations, is interrupted when even one person becomes conscious of their inner tyrant and chooses a different path. By doing this inner work, you do a service not only to yourself, but to humanity. As you heal your own aggression and fear, you contribute to a more sane and compassionate collective psyche. The fight against tyranny, in the end, begins in the human heart. And what replaces the tyrant within? Love. Not the soft, sentimental kind, but a mature love, which includes self-respect, accountability, and understanding. Remember Jung's words, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." The one is the shadow of the other. When you choose to rule yourself with love rather than fear, the will to power that once drove your inner tyrant fades. Love in this sense means acceptance of yourself, the courage to forgive your mistakes, and the commitment to growth. It means nurturing the vulnerable parts of you the tyrant once tried to exile. In the end, the tyrant inside you isn't an enemy to be destroyed, but a teacher to be understood. By listening to what your anger and fear have to say without letting them dictate your life, you turn their chaotic chants into meaningful dialogue. You transform oppression into wisdom. You step out of the cage that you once helped build. The journey is deeply personal and at times daunting, but it carries the promise of authenticity and inner peace. When you face the tyrant within, you reclaim your soul from bondage. You realize that the shadows inside you only have as much power as you give them. And as you integrate those shadows, you step into your true strength. The tyrant was never really out there. It was inside you all along, but so too is the hero who can overcome that tyrant. As you confront the darkness within, you simultaneously liberate the light within. In doing so, you become the author of your own story, no longer a captive of fate or fear. This is Carl Jung's dark truth and its luminous conclusion. The only way to defeat the tyrant of the world is to defeat the tyrant in your own heart.